In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of a bustling city, Marcus grew up surrounded by modest houses, cracked sidewalks, and a community that wore its struggles like a badge of honor. His world was one of resilience and resourcefulness, where families found joy in small victories and leaned on each other for support. Born into a family that valued hard work above all else, Marcus learned early on that survival often left little room for dreams. Marcus' passion for art bloomed unexpectedly during his childhood. He was a quiet boy, often lost in his thoughts, and while other kids his age played games in the streets, he found himself captivated by the shapes and colors of the world around him. The peeling paint on old fences, the vivid graffiti that adorned the sides of abandoned buildings, and the changing hues of the sky during sunsets all seemed to tell stories only he could hear. One day, he picked up a worn-out pencil and a scrap piece of paper from the kitchen table and began to draw. It wasn't much, just a sketch of his mother's tired but kind face, but it sparked something in him. His mother, Charlene, was the first to notice his talent. Though she worked long hours as a nurse's aide to make ends meet, she always made time to encourage Marcus. "You've got a gift, baby," she'd say, running her fingers over his drawings with a mix of pride and wonder. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." But her encouragement was often tempered by the harsh realities of their situation. Art, she feared, was a risky dream in a world where stability was elusive. "It's good to have dreams," she told him one evening, "but you've got to have something to fall back on." Marcus understood, but art was never just a dream for him. It was his lifeline. As he grew older, he began to see his neighborhood differently, not just as a collection of rundown houses and struggling families, but as a living canvas. The vibrant culture, the struggles, the laughter, and the tears of the people around him all became sources of inspiration. He started experimenting with whatever materials he could find: charcoal from the fireplace, leftover house paint, even coffee grounds to create shades of brown. At school, Marcus' talent caught the attention of his teachers, who encouraged him to join art clubs and enter competitions. But these small victories often felt overshadowed by the challenges he faced. His classmates didn't always understand his passion, and some mocked him for spending so much time on what they saw as a pointless hobby. "You think you're gonna get rich painting pictures?" one boy sneered during lunch. "Good luck with that." The ridicule hurt, but Marcus learned to channel his pain into his art. His sketches became more intricate, his paintings more emotive. Each piece told a story of resilience, capturing the beauty and struggle of life in his community. Despite his growing skill, the path to recognition was anything but smooth. After high school, Marcus faced the daunting question of what came next. College was out of reach financially, and art schools rarely offered scholarships to students from his background. Determined not to give up, he took on a series of odd jobs: washing dishes at a diner, stocking shelves at a grocery store, and even painting houses. Each job was a means to an end, funding his passion while giving him a deeper appreciation for the stories of ordinary people. In his small bedroom, which doubled as his studio, Marcus worked tirelessly. The walls were lined with canvases of various sizes, some finished, others waiting for his next burst of inspiration. His tools were humble: a handful of brushes, a palette he had made from an old cutting board, and a collection of paints he'd salvaged or bought second-hand. Despite the limitations, his work began to evolve. He experimented with textures, layering paint to create depth, and even incorporating found objects like bottle caps and scraps of fabric into his pieces. His unconventional approach caught the attention of a local art teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez, who stumbled upon his work during a community event. She was captivated by the raw emotion and creativity in his pieces. "Marcus," she said, her voice filled with awe, "your art speaks volumes. Have you ever thought about showcasing it?" The idea seemed both thrilling and terrifying. Marcus had always dreamed of sharing his work with a wider audience, but the thought of putting himself out there, of being judged, filled him with doubt. Mrs. Gonzalez, however, was persistent. She helped him prepare for his first small exhibition at a local community center. The night of the exhibition was a turning point. Marcus stood nervously in the corner, watching as people admired his work. Many were moved by his pieces, which depicted scenes of resilience and hope amidst adversity. A middle-aged woman with tears in her eyes approached him and said, "Your painting reminds me of my own childhood. Thank you for sharing this." The experience gave Marcus a taste of what was possible, but it also underscored the challenges ahead. Despite the positive feedback, none of his pieces sold that night, and the gallery owners he reached out to afterward showed little interest. "Your work is good," one owner told him, "but it's not what our clients are looking for." Rejection became a familiar companion. Gallery doors closed in his face, and potential buyers often underestimated his work, assuming it lacked sophistication. The art world, he realized, was a realm of privilege and exclusivity, where connections often mattered more than talent. But Marcus refused to let bitterness take root. Instead, he used each setback as fuel to refine his craft. In his free time, Marcus immersed himself in studying the works of great artists. He spent hours at the public library, poring over books about abstract expressionists, surrealists, and contemporary artists. He was particularly inspired by Jean-Michel Basquiat, whose bold, unapologetic style resonated with his own experiences. Basquiat's story of overcoming societal barriers to achieve greatness became a source of motivation. As the years passed, Marcus' work continued to evolve. He began incorporating themes of identity, race, and social justice into his pieces, using his art as a platform to challenge stereotypes and spark conversations. His paintings became more than just expressions of beauty, they were statements of defiance and hope. Despite the lack of recognition, Marcus never stopped believing in his potential. Late at night, after long shifts at work, he would sit in his dimly lit room, paintbrush in hand, and lose himself in the act of creation. The sound of the city outside, sirens, laughter, distant music, blended with the rhythm of his brushstrokes, creating a symphony of determination. One day, while walking home from work, Marcus spotted a discarded wooden panel near a construction site. To most people, it was just a piece of trash, but to Marcus, it was a blank canvas waiting to be transformed. He carried it home and spent weeks turning it into one of his most powerful pieces, a vivid portrayal of a young boy reaching for the stars, surrounded by a world trying to hold him back. It was a reflection of his own journey, and it became one of his personal favorites. As Marcus approached his late 20s, he found himself at a crossroads. The weight of financial struggles and constant rejection threatened to crush his spirit, but deep down, he knew he couldn't give up. His art wasn't just a hobby, it was his voice, his way of making sense of the world and leaving a mark on it. Little did he know, his breakthrough was closer than he realized. The years of hard work, the countless sacrifices, and the unwavering belief in his vision were about to pay off in ways he could never have imagined. For Marcus, the journey was just beginning, dismissed and humiliated. The day Marcus decided to approach the Davenport Gallery was one of those crisp mornings that promised a blend of hope and unease. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the city streets as Marcus walked nervously toward the towering glass building that housed the prestigious gallery. In his hands, he carried a worn leather portfolio, filled with his best works, each piece a testament to years of passion, struggle, and relentless determination. The Davenport Gallery was a world away from Marcus' modest neighborhood. The building itself exuded opulence, with its sleek facade and carefully curated window displays showcasing abstract sculptures and oil paintings with price tags that could buy houses. Marcus had spent weeks preparing for this moment, meticulously selecting and arranging his pieces to ensure they told a cohesive story. He had poured his soul into these works, believing they had the power to transcend boundaries and speak to anyone who truly looked. As he stepped inside, Marcus felt a wave of intimidation wash over him. The gallery was a pristine white space, illuminated by strategically placed lights that highlighted each artwork like a treasure. The air smelled faintly of lavender and polish, and the soft hum of classical music played in the background. Wealthy patrons strolled leisurely through the space, their conversations punctuated by the occasional clink of champagne glasses. Marcus' gaze fell on a woman standing near the back of the gallery. Ms. Evelyn Davenport was unmistakable, poised, elegant, and exuding an air of authority that made people stand a little straighter in her presence. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, her hair swept back in a chignon, and her sharp blue eyes scanning the room with a mixture of scrutiny and detachment. She was renowned in the art world for her discerning taste and equally notorious for her biting commentary. Artists either dreamed of her approval or dreaded her dismissal. Clutching his portfolio tighter, Marcus approached her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Excuse me, Ms. Davenport," he began, his voice steady, despite his nerves. "I'm Marcus Reed. I'm an artist, and I was hoping you could take a look at my work." Ms. Davenport turned to him slowly, her eyes narrowing as she took in his appearance. Marcus had dressed as neatly as he could, pressed slacks, a button-down shirt, and polished shoes, but he could still feel the weight of her judgment. Her gaze lingered on his worn portfolio, the scuffs on his shoes, and the nervous energy radiating from him. "And what kind of art do you do, Mr. Reed?" she asked, her tone clipped and vaguely dismissive. "I focus on mixed media and abstract pieces," Marcus replied, opening his portfolio to reveal his work. The first piece was a vibrant painting that combined bold brushstrokes with textured layers, depicting a figure rising from a sea of chaos, a metaphor for resilience. Ms. Davenport glanced briefly at the artwork before letting out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. "Abstract, you say? Well, I hope you understand that abstraction is not merely about throwing paint on a canvas. It requires depth, sophistication, and, most importantly, a certain pedigree." Her words stung, but Marcus pressed on. "I understand, ma'am. These pieces are deeply personal. They reflect my experiences and the stories of my community. I believe they offer a perspective that's unique?" Ms. Davenport interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Every aspiring artist believes their work is unique. The question is whether it aligns with the tastes of serious collectors. Frankly, Mr. Reed, I'm not sure your style would resonate with the clientele we cater to." Marcus felt a flush of heat rise to his face. "I'd appreciate it if you could take a closer look," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've spent years developing this portfolio, and I believe my work has something meaningful to offer." Ms. Davenport sighed audibly this time and waved a manicured hand. "Very well," she said, flipping through the pages with the same detached air one might use when browsing a menu. Her lips pursed as she stopped at a painting of a mother and child, their figures intertwined in a swirl of warm hues. "This is quaint," she said finally. "But I must be honest with you, Mr. Reed. This gallery represents artists whose work exudes refinement and universal appeal. Your pieces, while they may hold sentimental value, lack the polish and sophistication required for this space." Marcus felt as though the air had been knocked out of him. "Polish?" he echoed, struggling to keep his composure. "My work is meant to evoke emotion and tell stories. Isn't that what art is supposed to do?" Ms. Davenport's expression remained unmoved. "Art is also a business," she said coolly. "And business requires appeal. To put it plainly, Mr. Reed, I don't see buyers in our circles connecting with this." Her hesitation before the word "this" felt like a slap in the face. Marcus' hands tightened around his portfolio as he glanced around the room. A few patrons had noticed the exchange and were watching with faint smirks or awkward glances, clearly entertained by the spectacle. One of the gallery assistants, a young woman standing behind the reception desk, shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I see," Marcus said finally, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Thank you for your time." Ms. Davenport didn't respond. She had already turned her attention to another patron, dismissing Marcus as though he were a minor inconvenience. He walked out of the gallery, the weight of rejection pressing down on his shoulders. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but Marcus felt utterly disconnected from it. He found a bench a few blocks away and sat down, his portfolio resting on his lap. For a long moment, he simply stared at the ground, replaying Ms. Davenport's words in his mind. They echoed like a cruel refrain: lacks polish, lacks sophistication, lacks appeal. A part of him wanted to give up then and there. To accept that the world he had worked so hard to enter was impenetrable, built on barriers designed to keep people like him out. But another part of him, the part that had carried him through years of struggle, refused to surrender. He thought of his mother's words, "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Marcus opened his portfolio and looked at his work. Each piece was a labor of love, a fragment of his soul laid bare. He refused to believe it was worthless. If Ms. Davenport couldn't see its value, then he would find someone who could. As he sat there, the initial sting of rejection began to give way to a quiet resolve. He remembered the faces of the people in his community who had supported him, who had believed in his talent even when the world didn't. They deserved to see their stories told, to see their struggles and triumphs immortalized in art. "I won't stop," Marcus whispered to himself, the words a promise. Not for her, not for anyone. He stood up, clutching his portfolio tightly, and began walking. The city stretched out before him, a maze of possibilities and challenges. Somewhere out there, he knew, was a place for his work, a place where it would be valued not for its pedigree, but for its heart. And so, with determination burning in his chest, Marcus continued his journey, knowing that this was only the beginning. Unexpected fame and recognition. Months had passed since Marcus left the Davenport Gallery, his heart battered but his determination intact. The sting of rejection lingered, but he channeled that pain into his work, pouring more of himself into his art than ever before. His bedroom-turned-studio had become his sanctuary, the walls now crowded with vibrant canvases and scattered sketches. Each piece told a story, of resilience, of hope, of the beauty and complexity of life in his community. One evening, after another long shift stocking shelves at the grocery store, Marcus sat at his desk, brushing the final strokes onto a painting titled A Quiet Triumph. The piece depicted a lone figure standing amidst a chaotic swirl of colors, their posture defiant, their gaze steady. It was a reflection of Marcus' own journey, a declaration of survival against the odds. Exhausted but satisfied, he propped the painting against the wall to dry and fell asleep, not knowing that his life was about to change. The catalyst came from an unexpected place. On a sunny Saturday morning, a local art enthusiast named Serena Alvarez stumbled upon Marcus' work at a community arts event. Serena, an avid collector and social media influencer, was immediately captivated by the raw emotion and innovative techniques in Marcus' pieces. She purchased one of his paintings, a hauntingly beautiful depiction of a family gathered around a table lit by a single candle, titled Unbroken Bonds. Later that evening, Serena posted a photo of the painting on her Instagram account, accompanied by a heartfelt caption. "Art like this doesn't just speak, it roars." This piece by Marcus Reed tells a story of love, struggle, and perseverance. It's a reminder of the power of resilience. If you don't know his name yet, you will soon. Serena's post went viral within hours. Her followers, many of whom were prominent figures in the art world, flooded the comments with praise and curiosity. "Where can I see more of his work? This is incredible. Does he have a gallery? I need to buy something from this artist." Marcus had no idea what was happening until his phone started buzzing incessantly the next morning. Confused, he opened his social media accounts to find hundreds of messages and notifications. Strangers were reaching out, praising his art, asking about commissions, and inquiring where they could purchase his pieces. At first, Marcus thought it was some kind of mistake, but when he saw Serena's post and the overwhelming response it had garnered, reality set in. The momentum grew rapidly. Serena, recognizing Marcus' talent and the potential impact of her platform, reached out to him personally. "Your work is extraordinary, Marcus," she said during their first phone call. "It deserves to be seen by the world. Let me help you make that happen." With Serena's guidance, Marcus began navigating the unfamiliar waters of online exposure. She helped him create a professional website and social media profiles, showcasing his portfolio in a way that highlighted his unique voice and vision. Orders began pouring in, and Marcus found himself scrambling to keep up with the demand. But the true turning point came when one of his paintings caught the attention of James Whitaker, a celebrated art dealer known for discovering and promoting emerging talent. Whitaker, a man with a keen eye for brilliance, was immediately drawn to Marcus' work. There's something visceral about his pieces, Whitaker said during a private conversation with Serena. They have a soul, a rawness, that you don't often see in the polished world of contemporary art. Whitaker arranged a meeting with Marcus, visiting his makeshift studio in the heart of his modest neighborhood. The two men couldn't have been more different, Whitaker, with his tailored suit and air of refinement, and Marcus, still wearing his work uniform from the grocery store. But the moment Whitaker laid eyes on Marcus' portfolio, he was captivated. "Marcus," Whitaker said, his voice tinged with excitement, "your work is extraordinary. I want to help you bring it to the world." At first, Marcus was hesitant. The rejection he had faced at the Davenport Gallery had left him wary of the art world's elitism. But Whitaker's genuine admiration for his work and his promise to preserve its authenticity won Marcus over. Together, they began planning Marcus' first major exhibition. The exhibition, titled Visions of Resilience, was held at a prestigious gallery in the city. Whitaker spared no expense in promoting the event, ensuring that the art world's elite would attend. On the night of the opening, Marcus stood nervously at the back of the room, watching as guests filtered in. The gallery was transformed, each piece displayed with precision, the lighting casting a warm glow that brought out the richness of his colors and textures. The response was overwhelming. Patrons lingered in front of his paintings, their faces reflecting a range of emotions: wonder, sadness, admiration. Critics murmured words of praise, their notebooks filling with observations about Marcus' innovative use of mixed media and the deeply personal narratives in his work. One painting, Eclipsed Light, became the centerpiece of the exhibition. It depicted a young boy standing beneath a fractured sky, his hand outstretched toward a faint beam of sunlight. Breaking through the clouds. The piece was both haunting and hopeful, a metaphor for the struggles and aspirations of those who felt overlooked by society. By the end of the night, nearly all of Marcus' pieces had sold, some for prices that left him speechless. The art world was abuzz with talk of the hidden gem who had emerged seemingly out of nowhere, and Marcus' story began to spread like wildfire. As Marcus' fame grew, so did his opportunities. His work was featured in major art publications, and he was invited to participate in exhibitions across the country. Collectors vied for his pieces, driving prices to staggering heights. At an auction held just months after his first exhibition, one of his paintings sold for over $1 million, a milestone that marked his arrival on the global stage. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded. He refused to let the sudden wealth and recognition change who he was or where he came from. Instead, he used his newfound success to give back to the community that had shaped him. He established a foundation to support aspiring artists from underprivileged backgrounds, providing them with resources, mentorship, and platforms to showcase their work. One of Marcus' proudest moments came when he hosted a free art workshop at the community center where he had once displayed his work as an unknown artist. Children and young adults from the neighborhood gathered around him, their eyes wide with admiration as he shared his techniques and encouraged them to express themselves fearlessly. "You don't need fancy tools or a big studio," he told them, holding up a painting he had created on a discarded wooden panel. "All you need is your imagination and your voice. The world needs to hear your stories." As the workshop ended, a young boy approached Marcus, clutching a sketchbook filled with rough drawings. "Do you think I could be an artist like you someday?" he asked, his voice filled with both hope and uncertainty. Marcus knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze. "You already are an artist," he said with a smile. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Marcus' journey from a struggling artist to a celebrated name in the art world was a testament to the power of resilience, authenticity, and unwavering belief in one's vision. His work continued to inspire millions, not just for its beauty, but for the stories it told, stories of struggle, triumph, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to dream. A surprising return to the gallery. The Davenport Gallery had changed little in the years since Marcus had walked out of its doors, humiliated and disheartened. The same pristine white walls gleamed under carefully placed spotlights, and the same aura of exclusivity and elitism clung to the space like an invisible fog. But this time, Marcus was not the same person who had once stood trembling under the sharp gaze of Evelyn Davenport. He was no longer an unknown artist seeking validation, he was now a celebrated figure in the art world, his work fetching millions and gracing the walls of museums and collectors around the globe. It was a sunny afternoon when Marcus decided to return. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, with polished leather shoes and a watch that subtly hinted at his success, he walked into the gallery with an air of quiet confidence. In his hand, he carried nothing but a sleek leather notebook, a far cry from the battered portfolio he had once clutched nervously. He had no intention of being the timid young man Ms. Davenport had dismissed all those years ago. Today, the roles would be reversed. The moment he stepped inside, a young gallery assistant greeted him with a warm smile, clearly mistaking him for a wealthy collector. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Davenport Gallery. Are you here to browse our current collection?" Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the space. The gallery was bustling with well-dressed patrons sipping champagne as they admired the carefully curated works on display. "I am," he replied, his tone measured. "I've heard great things about this gallery." The assistant's smile widened. "You've come to the right place. Ms. Davenport herself is here today. She'd be delighted to speak with you." Marcus' lips curled into a subtle smile. Perfect, he thought. That would be wonderful. Ms. Davenport was perched near the back of the gallery, engaged in conversation with a pair of older patrons. Her signature look, a tailored gray suit and meticulously styled hair, remained unchanged, but the years had added faint lines to her face and a touch of silver to her hair. She exuded the same air of authority, her voice crisp and confident as she extolled the virtues of the artwork before her. The gallery assistant approached her with a polite whisper, and Ms. Davenport turned, her sharp eyes landing on Marcus. For a brief moment, she seemed to study him, her expression betraying no recognition. Then, with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to courting high-profile clients, she strode toward him, her hand outstretched. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice smooth and polished. "I'm Evelyn Davenport, the owner of this gallery. It's always a pleasure to meet a new patron." "Marcus Reed," he replied, shaking her hand firmly. "I've recently developed an interest in expanding my collection, and I wanted to see what your gallery has to offer." Ms. Davenport's eyes gleamed at the mention of a collection. "Well, Mr. Reed, you've come to one of the finest galleries in the city. Our current collection features some of the most sought-after contemporary artists. I'd be happy to give you a personal tour." "Please," Marcus said with a nod, his expression neutral. As Ms. Davenport led him through the gallery, she spoke with the practiced ease of someone who had given this tour countless times. She pointed out the artists whose works adorned the walls, dropping names and prices with an air of importance. "This piece, for example, is by Victor Langston, one of the most prominent abstract artists of our time. It's priced at $350,000 and has already attracted significant interest." Marcus regarded the painting with polite interest. "It's striking," he said, though his tone was deliberately noncommittal. "But tell me, Ms. Davenport, how do you decide which artists to represent?" Ms. Davenport smiled, clearly pleased by the question. "We have a rigorous selection process. We prioritize artists whose work demonstrates exceptional skill and universal appeal. Our clientele expects nothing less." "And what about representation?" Marcus pressed, his voice calm but pointed. "Do you make an effort to include artists from diverse backgrounds, or is that not a priority for your gallery?" Ms. Davenport hesitated for a fraction of a second, her smile faltering slightly. "Of course, we value diversity," she said, her tone carefully measured. "But ultimately, our focus is on quality and marketability. Our clients are discerning, and we must cater to their tastes." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, filing her response away. "I see. It's just that I've noticed a lack of diversity in some of the galleries I've visited. It's refreshing when a space makes an effort to highlight underrepresented voices." Ms. Davenport's smile tightened. "A valid observation, Mr. Reed. I assure you, we are always open to new perspectives, provided, of course, they meet our standards." The tour continued, but Marcus couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in Ms. Davenport's demeanor. While she remained courteous, there was an undercurrent of unease in her tone, as though she were uncertain whether she was being tested. Finally, they reached a section of the gallery where a series of bold, emotionally charged paintings hung in a prominent display. Marcus froze, his eyes locking onto one piece in particular. It was Eclipsed Light, the very painting that had become the centerpiece of his first major exhibition. His heart skipped a beat, but he quickly masked his reaction. Turning to Ms. Davenport, he gestured to the painting. "This piece, it's remarkable. Who's the artist?" Ms. Davenport's face lit up with a practiced enthusiasm. That is by Marcus Reed," she said, her voice filled with the kind of reverence reserved for celebrated names. "He's an extraordinary talent, one of the rising stars of the art world. His work has been making waves internationally, and this particular piece is one of his most sought after." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. And how did this gallery acquire his work?" Ms. Davenport hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the question. "We obtained it through one of our trusted intermediaries," she said smoothly. "It's not often that his pieces become available, so this was quite a coup for us." "I see," Marcus said, stepping closer to the painting. He let the silence linger for a moment before turning to her, his voice calm but laced with unmistakable weight. "You don't recognize me, do you, Ms. Davenport?" She frowned, her brow furrowing slightly as she studied him more closely. "I'm afraid I don't. Should I?" Marcus' lips curled into a faint smile. "We've met before. A few years ago, I came to this very gallery. I brought my portfolio, hoping to show you my work. You dismissed me before even giving it a proper look. You told me my art lacked polish, sophistication, and appeal." Ms. Davenport's face drained of color, her composure faltering for the first time. I don't recall," she stammered, though the flicker of recognition in her eyes betrayed her. "I see many artists, Anne." "You dismissed me," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. "And now, here we are. My work is hanging on your walls, praised and admired. Funny how things change, isn't it?" The room seemed to go silent around them. A few patrons nearby had overheard the exchange and were watching with growing interest. Ms. Davenport's discomfort was palpable, her polished facade crumbling under the weight of Marcus' words. I must have made a mistake," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I deeply regret any offense I may have caused." Marcus regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small nod, he said, "We all make mistakes, Ms. Davenport. The question is whether we learn from them." He turned back to the painting, his eyes lingering on it for a moment, before addressing her again. "I'll take this piece," he said. "Not because I need it, I created it. But because I think it's time it found a home where it's truly valued." Ms. Davenport nodded stiffly, her hands trembling as she signaled for an assistant to process the sale. As Marcus walked out of the gallery, the painting carefully wrapped and carried by an attendant, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. He had come full circle, not as a supplicant, but as a force to be reckoned with. The turning tables were complete. Closing the circle. The decision to purchase the Davenport Gallery wasn't made on a whim. For Marcus, it represented more than an investment or a business opportunity, it was a reclamation of power, a chance to transform a space that once symbolized rejection into one of inclusivity and celebration. Over the years, he had built a substantial fortune through his art and investments, but his greatest pride came from using that success to uplift others. Buying the gallery was the culmination of a journey that had begun in humiliation and would end in triumph. The acquisition process was swift. Marcus approached the gallery's board with a generous offer that left little room for negotiation. The gallery had struggled in recent years, partly due to its rigid, outdated approach to art curation, and the board was eager to offload it to a well-funded buyer. The moment the deal was finalized, Marcus stood in the center of the gallery, now his gallery, and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. "This place is going to change," he said to his team of advisors. "No more gatekeeping. No more elitism. It's time for this gallery to reflect the world as it truly is, diverse, vibrant, and full of untapped talent. The announcement of the gallery's new ownership sent ripples through the art world. News outlets and social media buzzed with headlines. Renowned artist Marcus Reed purchases prestigious Davenport Gallery. Critics speculated about what changes he would bring, while fans celebrated his bold move. Marcus, however, remained focused on his vision. His first act as owner was to rename the gallery. The Davenport Gallery became the Reed Center for Contemporary Art, a name that honored his journey while signaling a fresh start. He immediately began reaching out to underrepresented artists, inviting them to submit their work for consideration. Word spread quickly, and within weeks, the gallery was inundated with submissions from artists of all backgrounds: painters, sculptors, photographers, and mixed-media creators, many of whom had never before had the chance to showcase their work in a prominent space. Marcus also took steps to make the gallery more accessible to the public. Admission fees were reduced, and free community art workshops were introduced. He partnered with local schools and nonprofits to create programs that nurtured young talent, providing mentorship and resources to aspiring artists who might otherwise be overlooked. It was during this period of transformation that Ms. Davenport requested a meeting. Marcus was surprised, but not entirely unprepared for the request. Despite her fall from grace after their last encounter, she had remained a fixture in the art world, though with diminished influence. When she arrived at his office, she looked different, more subdued, her once immaculate attire replaced with a simple blazer and slacks. There was a humility in her demeanor that Marcus hadn't seen before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said, her voice soft but steady. Marcus gestured for her to sit. "I wasn't sure I would," he admitted honestly. "But I'm curious to hear what you have to say." Ms. Davenport nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "I owe you an apology," she began. "When you first came to me years ago, I dismissed you without giving your work the consideration it deserved. It was wrong of me, narrow-minded and unkind. Seeing your success has forced me to confront my biases, and I realize now how much talent I must have overlooked because of them." Marcus listened quietly, his expression unreadable. "I know I can't undo the past," she continued. "But I'd like to offer my support in any way I can. If you'll have me, I'd like to work under your leadership. I believe in the changes you're making here, and I want to be part of them." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Marcus considered the weight of her request. He had every reason to turn her away, to hold her accountable for the pain she had caused. But Marcus was not the same man she had dismissed, and his journey had taught him the value of forgiveness, not as an absolution, but as a way to move forward. "I appreciate your apology," he said finally. "And I believe people can change if they're willing to confront their biases and do the work. If you're serious about supporting this gallery's mission, there's a place for you here. But I need you to understand that this space is no longer about exclusivity or catering to a select few. It's about giving everyone a chance to be seen and heard." Ms. Davenport nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I understand. And I'm ready to prove myself." With Ms. Davenport on board as a senior advisor, Marcus set his sights on organizing the gallery's first major exhibition under its new identity. Titled Breaking Boundaries, Voices from the Margins, the exhibition would feature works from artists of diverse backgrounds, each piece telling a story of resilience, identity, and hope. The selection process was rigorous but inclusive. Marcus personally reviewed hundreds of submissions, ensuring that every artist had a fair chance. The final collection was a stunning array of talent, featuring pieces that ranged from bold political statements to intimate portrayals of personal experiences. The night of the exhibition's opening was a moment of triumph. The gallery was transformed into a celebration of diversity, with each artwork thoughtfully displayed and accompanied by stories about the artists and their journeys. Guests from all walks of life filled the space, their faces alight with wonder and admiration. One corner of the gallery was dedicated to a retrospective of Marcus' own work, tracing his evolution as an artist. The centerpiece was Eclipsed Light, the painting that had come to symbolize his rise to fame. Beneath it hung a plaque that read, "This piece represents not only My journey, but the journey of every artist who dares to dream beyond the boundaries set before them. It is a reminder that art belongs to everyone, and its power lies in its ability to connect us all. As the evening progressed, Marcus took a moment to step back and observe the scene. The gallery buzzed with energy, the air filled with the hum of conversations and laughter. He saw families exploring the space together, young artists sketching in their notebooks, and patrons engaging deeply with the works on display. It was everything he had envisioned and more. Ms. Davenport approached him, a glass of champagne in hand. "You've done something remarkable here," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Marcus smiled. "We've done something remarkable. Change doesn't happen alone." She nodded, raising her glass in a toast. To change, and to the artists who make it possible. In the weeks and months that followed, the gallery continued to thrive, becoming a beacon of hope and opportunity for artists and art lovers alike. Marcus remained at the helm, using his platform to amplify voices that had long been silenced. He knew that his journey wasn't just about his success, it was about paving the way for others to follow. The final scene of his story unfolded not in a gallery, but at a community art workshop. Surrounded by children eagerly painting on oversized canvases, Marcus knelt beside a young girl who was struggling to mix the right shade of blue. "Try adding a little white," he said gently, guiding her hand. The girl looked up at him, her face lighting up with excitement as the color transformed before her eyes. "Like this?" she asked. "Exactly like that," Marcus replied, smiling. "You're doing great." As he watched the children create, their laughter filling the room, Marcus felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had come full circle, transforming his pain into purpose and his dreams into a legacy that would inspire generations to come. In the end, Marcus Reed's story was not just about art, it was about the power of perseverance, the importance of representation, and the unyielding belief that everyone, no matter where they come from, deserves a chance to shine.